All right, everyone. Cara Bradley here. It is 2 o'clock, at least my time, and we're going to get started with our flow training. I appreciate you all being here live. It's always so great to have people all over the world. We've got people from all over the world joining in to talk about one of my absolutely most favorite topics and something that I feel really passionate about sharing with everybody and anybody who will listen, and that is flow. What flow is, how we access it, how we train to be in it, how we can really change our lives and our relationship with others, our relationship with ourselves, with our work, with play, by just understanding what flow is. And so we're going to get right at it. I'm just going to tell you a real quick history about myself, just so you know where I'm coming from with all this. And then we're going to get into a brief discussion about what flow is, and also about how to train yourself to recognize flow, to understand what some of the triggers are that help you access flow, and then also how to really train your brain in your ability to make it a little bit more predictable in your life. So I come at you as a teacher. I've been teaching for 35 years. I've been teaching all kinds of movement, yoga for the last 20 years, and meditation and mindfulness. And so I've studied the brain quite a bit and understand that we can change the way our brain operates. And really that is my entry point with flow, is understanding and helping people understand how to change the physiology of your body to help you change the way that you access different states and recognize where you're at. So I'm going to jump right at it. This is just a real brief description of who I am. I'm not going to spend too much time here, but I am, like I said, a teacher. For the most part, just passionate teacher and somebody that really loves to help others experience life fully. And there's a lot more life out there than a lot of us are living. And most of it is because we get stuck in our busy mind. So when we can understand how to shift beyond our busy mind and access a more natural state of clarity and confidence, we tend to just do a lot better and feel a lot better as well. So I'll chat a little bit more. I'll throw those links up a little bit later. But this really isn't about me. It's about you. It's about you and understanding what it is you're doing every day and what kind of state you're living in, and how perhaps you may be accessing some peak performance states that you may not be realizing that you're accessing all the time. So flow is, and I take this quote directly from the Flow Genome Project and I'll talk about them a lot more in the next few slides, but a peak performance state where you feel better and perform better. A peak performance state where you feel better and perform better. And that's what generally flow is thought of as, this non-ordinary state. In my own experience, though, I don't think it's as non-ordinary as we may think it is. Oftentimes when I'm teaching people, I hear from others, oh, how do I become more mindful? And how do I get more present? And actually, you know, we're more present than we're not. We're actually showing up for life a whole lot more than we're not. And so as a teacher, I like to just help point out for people when they are in this state of flow or a state of full engagement, or what it feels like to start to recognize what it feels like to be fully present. So I'm going to tell you just a little story about myself, and I'm going to throw these slides up here for you to start to think about your own experiences and where, when, how, in the past, maybe even today, you may have experienced a state like I'm going to explain to you. Now, I've got a couple of questions here. So some of you, if you're not able to hear me, you might need to open up that YouTube link. I don't know, Webinar Jams changed things up a little bit since I have last used it. So Jamie, there's not a video. This is going to be just a slideshow with me chatting. Thanks for joining. So, and if anybody else is having any issues, just throw it up there on the comments. I'll try to help you out. But if you can't hear me, then open up your YouTube link. All right, so here we go. Some of you may have heard this story if you've read my book, or if you joined me. I just recently did a Flow at Work webinar with Will, a great app with my friend Joe Burton. So if you've heard this story, just close your eyes even so, because you may be able to kind of pull something from your own life's experience in what I'm going to say. And this was really my first understanding that I could shift into a place where I could access an extraordinary amount of intelligence that I didn't know I had. So I was a college track runner. I was mediocre. I was middle of the pack, a mid-distance runner. And I was transferring colleges, was coming up on my last college race. And I did something very different before that race. Instead of just hanging out with my teammates and fooling around till my coach said, hey, you got 10 minutes, go warm up, I did something different. I went off on my own a good half hour before my race. And I started to take this very slow warm-up jog. During this jog, I thought to myself, wow, you know, you've had a couple of years as a college track runner, but you know, you haven't touched your personal record in a long time. So why don't you just try to beat your personal best? And so during that very slow warm-up jog, I started to say to myself over and over again, personal best, personal best, personal best. Now I was 19 years old. I was off on my own. I was about to make this big life change. And I had had a very mediocre track career. And so I, during that warm-up jog, had settled myself into a state that I'd never experienced consciously. I stepped onto the track, not knowing this, of course. Stepped onto the track, remember the red track. I remember the smell of the air. I remember feeling really, really calm and really, really settled. The gun went off. I ran the 800. I took off. First lap, I don't remember much. The second lap, I remember having one thought. Okay, so usually I was this runner who was just riddled with nerves. I was just always exhausted by the time a race started because I knew how much it was going to hurt. You could probably relate to that if you're an athlete. Well, anyhow, during that second lap, I passed our best mid-distance runner. She was top. And I thought to myself, my one thought, wow, she must be having a really bad day. And so I finished third. I ran, crossed the finish line. My teammates jumped on me. I had no idea what happened until I looked up at the clock and I had shaved seconds off my 800. Right? So within 2 minutes and change, I went from mediocre to elite. Now, here's the real meat of the story, is that in that moment, I recognized that I had accessed something really special, that something was very, very different in that race than I'd ever experienced before. And so instead of being disappointed that it had taken me my whole track career to find this strength in me, I realized from that day forward, if I could find out how to do that again, it would change my life. I knew that. If I could harness that state that I ran and apply it to every area of my life, it would change me. So that's what I have done for the last really 20, 30 years, is studied what happened to me on the track that day. Now, this was a long time ago, and actually the book Flow wasn't even out. It was a few years before the book Flow by Mihály Csíkszentmihályi was out. So the internet wasn't even around, right? So I just dove into practices, Eastern practices, yoga, meditation. I read everything I could on altered states because I knew what happened to me was just not my normal waking state. So I ask you, has anything like this ever happened for you? Maybe it's not as extreme or you don't remember it in full detail, but there are many gateways into flow. And musicians, artists, surgeons, even somebody presenting, like me right now, just presenting to you, I can access this state of full engagement where I am right here in every word. So I ask you, we're going to do a little poll. How do you access flow? Have you ever even thought of it? Do you have a moment or something that you do often that allows you to access a state of something similar to what I'm speaking of? So there is a poll there on the chat bar on the side. So if you, I have to publish it first. There you go. So if you could please just answer that, if you would, just to let us know, where do you find flow? Is it at work? Is it outside in nature? Is it when you're quiet and reflective or with friends? Or maybe you're just not really sure what flow is yet, and that is totally cool. So we've got some at work coming. That's awesome. 31% right now at work. A lot of people, sometimes quiet and reflective, outside in nature, and in a crowd. So we all get triggered in different ways, right? We all have different personalities and different experiences where we're able to access our natural state of full engagement. So we have mostly those of you that find flow when you're quiet and reflective. Outside in nature is always super popular. And so that's a pretty good indication. I'm not sure if you can see those results, but I'm going to end the poll now. But it's really helpful to have an idea of how you access flow. So in flow, in general, the way that this state has been described by many and by even the experts that I'll talk about is that in flow you feel better and perform better. And we're going to talk a bit about that. And if you have any questions, I invite you to throw them up in the chat bar, and I'll try and grab them when I can peek over there. In flow, we feel better and we perform better. And we're going to take that apart a little bit. Now, this is something that has been written about and studied by some of my teachers, Jamie Wheel and Stephen Cutler of the Flow Genome Project. And I will put their access information and websites and books and all in, you'll be able to access that shortly. And in fact, if any of you have that, you can always throw that up on the chat. So in flow, you feel better and you perform better. Let's talk about the feel better for a few moments. So think about that. When you access this state of full engagement, so you think about me on the track or you in the mountains, or maybe it's when you're playing the piano or cooking, or when you're alone in silence, or when you're in front of a crowd, when you're playing a sport, challenging your body. There's so many different ways for us to really drop into the present moment, which in many ways is what flow is. It's just deep, deep presence. Deep, deep presence. When everything around us starts to get quiet. When we start to access our senses in bright, vivid, high definition. So you think about those times in your life. It can be in front of a computer. It can be in front of a piano. It can be with your child. It can be with your dog. It could be with people. It could be alone. When we access this state of deep engagement, we have this energized focus. We feel more relaxed and we just have more fun, actually. Also, we perform better. We just do better. When we're fully present, right? Come back to the power of now. When we're fully present, we are more creative. We contribute more. We're more compassionate. We have enhanced problem solving. So there's a lot going on physiologically that we'll talk about, from a chemical standpoint to our ability to just read our senses and access our intelligence. So Lee says he finds flow in all these places. And that's right. So if you just pause for a moment and go back to your morning or evening or wherever you are, we're all in different time zones. And just think about, was there a moment today when you just had this sense that all was well? You know, so often when we are able to shift into a state of full presence in whatever we're doing, we have this sense of relief, this sense of clarity, and it might just be like that, right? So as a teacher, what I love helping people do is to recognize that you're already doing it. You don't need to learn. It's helpful to be reminded, but you don't need to learn how to do this stuff because you're already doing it. In many ways, it's the most natural thing we can do. As kids, we were in flow all the time, right? As kids, we were so engaged in playing, in putting together the puzzle and playing with the little animals and the soldiers or whatever it was you did in your make-believe. So in many ways, this training is more of a relearning, a remembering, which is really what mindfulness means, by the way. To be mindful is just to remember. Right? We're remembering what it feels like to drop into a state of full engagement, full presence. And there's some ways that we can, as we're going to learn, we can trigger that. And it's helpful to know what best triggers you. So let's move on. Your brain on flow. So I am standing on the shoulders of some really fantastic teachers on flow, and I'm going to recommend highly that you check out a couple of books and websites. Your brain on flow. So there's been research, and there's more being done through the Flow Genome Project that is studying our bodies, our brains on flow. When we're in this extreme sense of presence, where time slows down, where our mind gets quiet, where our senses light up, there's all these reasons neurochemically and physiologically why this is happening. So on flow, there is this beautiful flush of this chemical cocktail. And in fact, Jamie Wheel calls it the big six. The big six chemicals, it's like the perfect storm where we've got enough high and enough low and enough connectors that help us to come into this full state of awareness and connection and adrenaline and boost so that we surge and create and explore and connect in ways that we can't normally do when we're stuck in a busy mind, when we're stuck in doubt and fear. So I am not going to get into the details of the chemistry because that's not my strength yet. But I will send you off to reading the book Stealing Fire or The Rise of Superman, or just heading off to the Flow Genome Project, where they have tons of information on how to understand all of the research that's going on. So what does flow feel like? And this is what I love teaching people. I love actually just reminding people to recognize flow all day long. So here's the book Stealing Fire. It just came out last February. It's a fantastic read by Jamie and Stephen. And they describe flow as stir. The tendencies of flow have these qualities of selflessness, timelessness, effortlessness, and richness. So let's just go through these. And you can even just close your eyes because sometimes it helps to get a sense of these qualities, because it's not something that's happening cognitively. This is something that's happening below the neck. Because what happens in flow is that our prefrontal cortex, right, the cognitive thinking, churning mind, powers down. It powers down. So if you recall back to my race, when I said I remember having one thought, and that one thought happened when I passed our best mid-distance runner. Other than that, my doubting mind, my fearing mind, all of the worries that usually came up during my race, that all went quiet. And that is the sense of selflessness, right? It's like when you're underwater. You ever go underwater and you just kind of hang out there, and it's like you just don't hear anything, or all you hear is yourself breathing. So when we are able to shift into these moments of full engagement, no matter what it is you're doing, whether you're rock climbing or you're laying down at the top of a mountain after a long hike, and you have this sense of just being so expansive that the boundaries of your being melt away. That's the sense of selflessness. Timelessness. When time slows down or speeds up or gets warped, where you don't even feel like there's a linear progression of time. So you may feel that or notice that when you're deeply involved in a work project. And all of a sudden it's like past lunch and you haven't even gotten up from your desk. Or if you're a musician and you get carried away hours later, you've been working on just even a few bars of a song. So this sense of timelessness is also another trait of flow. Effortlessness. The sense of being so light and available to the moment, to this moment, and this moment, where there's just a lightness and an agility to your thinking and your moving. So these are all really just traits of flow that you may sense or not, depending upon your triggers. Richness. The richness, and I like to call this high definition. The richness of the moment. When you are climbing a mountain and you see the green around you, and then the peak of the blue sky coming through, or the sunlight, and you feel the wind on your skin and your senses are lighting up, and the thumping of your heart and the pulsing and the burn in your quads, right? All of a sudden, just everything around you is just bright. It's like high voltage lights just turning on. So I'm painting this picture as using these words of Stephen and Jamie's, which are so helpful to help us now recall and remember and recognize these moments during our day when we slip into these states. So think about it, does any of this trigger? Is any of this triggering any of maybe your daily activities, or some of the things that you like to do weekly or monthly? So let's get to the training. Let's get to practicing flow. How do we even begin? As a mindfulness teacher, and I got to tell you, and I may get in trouble for this, but what do they say? Like, you have to ask for permission later. But as a mindfulness teacher, I teach a lot of mindfulness. I often call flow is really like mindfulness on steroids. Right? So it's this extreme state of engagement, of presence, right? So when I work with people to learn how to drop into flow, how to access flow, I really use many of the mindfulness techniques that I use when teaching just a basic mindfulness class. So the first thing to do is just to recognize it, just to know it. To know it in your life. What does it feel like? Where do I slip into presence? And what are my tendencies? So if we go back to my race, what got me there during my race? Well, most probably what got me into that flow state was that pre-warm-up jog. I went off on my own. I moved in rhythm. I settled myself so much that my mind quieted down. And when that happened, that doubt, the fear, the jitters, all of that noise that held me back in the past went quiet or powered off. Right? So that's what got me there. What gets you there? And we're going to talk about some of your flow triggers in a moment. But start to recognize and get to know what flow feels like for you. It'll be different than it feels like for me or anybody else. And what are your tendencies? Do you have this sense of selflessness, expansiveness, emptiness, boundarylessness? Do you lose yourself in time often? Or does maybe that just never happens? Do you have this sense of being light and agile and effortless when you are strumming your guitar or rolling around, running with your dog, whatever? Or richness, when do the lights come on bright for you? So when we can start tinkering with our experience, and really that's what we're doing here, everybody, we're just tinkering with our states of being. I often have to remind myself, it's like a smack on my head. Life is short. Life is short to be so freaking busy all the time that we forget to experience life. I often tell people that we spend more time trying to figure out how these things work, right? We're like working these things and trying to understand all the apps and the settings, and we spend so little time actually studying our states of being. So that's all we're doing here, and that's all really meditation is tinkering. You're tinkering with patterns. You're tinkering with habits. You're tinkering with different states of experience. Man, if life's too short to just go down the same road every single day. Why not tinker and experiment with life? And that's what these practices and this and really what my passion is about. Let's experiment. Let's explore, man. Let's just get to know ourselves in all different types of experiences. See what works, see what doesn't. So get to know flow. Get curious about it when you're working out. Maybe if I push myself a little more, I can shift into a state where I feel a little bit more awake and alive. So the first practice or training is really just to get to know what it feels like to be in flow. So this slide is something I use a lot when I work with athletes. It's just a reminder, this simple quote. A distracted mind has no power. A directed mind has limitless potential. And this to me speaks to a lot of this whole idea of feeling better and performing better when we're in flow. A distracted mind has no power. When we're distracted, when we're busy, when we're worried, in doubt, riddled with fear and nerves, it weakens our capacity to access our intelligence. But when we can learn to direct our mind, right? And the first step is simple mindfulness. When we can learn to train our mind to pay attention on purpose, moment to moment, and we do that over and over again, then now we're talking. Now we can start to access a hell of a lot more intelligence than what's available to us in just this thinking, worrying, fearing, doubting, comparing, judging mind. So hang on to that, because we're going to practice in a few moments just a real simple exercise to start training your mind to pay attention on purpose more often. So the next training or practice is just to know your flow triggers. And these flow triggers come from Mihály Csíkszentmihályi, who wrote the book called Flow, and I'll throw that up there in a little bit, and also from Stephen Kotler and Jamie Wheel. So they've done tons of surveys and research in understanding what triggers flow for people. So the second aspect of learning how to access flow more often is knowing what triggers you. So you want to name your triggers, and we're going to go through a couple in a moment. And then you want to, with a few of them, schedule them into your life. And I'll talk about that. And just practice, man. Just practice doing it. Practice triggering. Practice whatever you know helps you to flip the switch. So one of the first triggers is this idea of just paying attention, right? I like to call it fierce focus. So it's not just a focus like, okay, I'm going to eat the raisin and enjoy my raisin, right? So if any of you have ever taken mindfulness classes, a lot of time you spend a lot of time eating raisins, right? But it really is about pulling your energy like laser-like focus on whatever you're doing, whether it be a problem solving a problem, or creating a spreadsheet, or connecting with somebody across a board table, presenting, walking on your own, writing, singing. Can I be fully here? And what does it feel like to be right here, right now? So a trigger for a lot of people is long periods of uninterrupted attention. This one pointed concentration, focusing on one task. So there's a great app out there called Brain FM. And I learned this in Flow Fundamentals with the Flow Genome Project. Brain FM is it's these binaural beats, and so if you put them on, I'll use this all the time when I work, and I'll put the Brain FM on for 30 minutes, and these beats come on, and it's just this very innocuous music that will help you focus. So you put it on for 30 minutes and you just stay on task for 30 minutes. And this is one of the ways that you can train your brain to pay attention on purpose. And over time, like any other muscle, we end up becoming stronger at being able to do that. So the first trigger is just how do you have fierce focus? What do you need? Some people like to work with like music. My kids who are in their early 20s, they always have music on when they're doing work. I'm like, I can't even understand how they're doing it, but it works for them. What works for you? And these are some questions you want to ask and take a look at. The second trigger, and by the way, there are 17 triggers that are out there that Stephen Kotler has identified. I'm going to go through 3. The second trigger is to set clear goals. When you have a clear goal, so for instance, I'm tapping that Brain FM, right? I'm putting on putting on my timer for my phone, and I know that I've got to get, 2 pages written for my blog. I've got a clear goal, and I'm going to get this done right here. I'm going to contain the situation. This will help us to come into that full engagement, right? This can help. Clear goal helps us to direct our attention. There's less rumination. So the first one was fierce focus, right? How do you access fierce focus or full attention? Do you need to shut down the music? Do you need to close the door? Do you need to be alone or in a crowd? And then can you set some clear goals for yourself that can help you to really hone in on what it is you need to do? And so I rock climb. I'm not very good. I'm a total beginner. It doesn't matter because every single time I climb, I experience flow because it's so simple, right? You're climbing up this, and I'm totally indoors, like I said, real novice at it. But I've got myself contained. I've got a goal, right? I got to make it up the wall, and it completely harnesses my attention. So I am like laser-like. So when I climb, I'm actually not climbing to get, to be like a good climber. I don't know if that's ever going to happen, but I actually climb to practice flow because I know that it is such an enormous trigger for me. So think about it. What are yours? And if you have any comments, by the way, throw them up there. I'd love to share with our group. The next trigger, this is 3 out of 17, by the way. So if you Google flow triggers, Stephen Kotler, you'll find all 17. The third trigger that we're going to talk about today is the challenge skills ratio. And this comes out of Csíkszentmihályi's book, Flow. So this is great. When we find that fine balance between not too hard and not too easy, when we're able to perform a task or sport or something where we have some skill, but yet there's still a little bit of challenge, that's when we come into this laser-like focus. That's when we're able to really come right in and access this full engagement state. So for me, climbing, like I said, just a novice, 5'9s, 5'10s, if I go and try and climb a 5'11, for the most part, I'm going to get up like 3. It's just not going to work. I'm going to get really frustrated. I'll try it, but I won't stay with it, and I'll certainly get into my head about it. But if I go to 5'10, 5'9, I know that I've got enough skill to get up a little bit, and it's challenging enough to keep me really super attentive. And this is really super helpful, this challenge skills ratio, when you start to apply flow at work. Because, and if you're a manager or a leader, it's really important to understand this as well for those that you're leading. If we're in a task that's too easy, what happens? We get bored. So if you look at this graph here, this is the challenge skills ratio with from flow. There's this flow channel, right, where it's not too hard and it's not too easy. If something's too hard, we go into panic or anxiety, or we get frustrated and we give up altogether. If the task is too easy, what happens? We just get bored. We get distracted, we fly away to Facebook, we go to the water cooler and hang out for a half hour. So in our own work and when we're leading others, we want to make sure that we are finding that balance, not too hard, not too easy, to keep us at full attention. Because when we're at full attention, that directed mind really has access to our potential, to our intelligence. So those 3 triggers, there are more. There are other flow triggers, and this comes off of the Flow Genome Project. Some of the other flow triggers are deep embodiment. For instance, deep meditation or silence, floating, if you've ever been in that kind of sensory deprivation tank. There's high consequences. So extreme athletes, of course, action sports, where there is that element of danger, where we've got to pay attention or we could, really be in trouble. That is also another way to trigger flow. Rich environments like a concert, being in a big crowd of people with music and dancing can shift our state from being stuck inside ourselves to being in this more communal, collective intelligence, this collective awareness. So some of my flow triggers, just to give you a little bit of an idea to hopefully trigger some of them in you, is nature. Like being in big, expansive nature, tops of mountains, by oceans, anything that's wide open field, helps us to get out of our own way, helps us to embrace something beyond ourselves, which helps us to then shift from being stuck in our busy mind to being more in our naturally clear, open, aware state of being. So I'll go from nature to heights, right? Shoot, bring me up too high. All of a sudden, I start to feel the fear. right? So sometimes I used to I go into like full panic, right? But with training and maturing, I've learned to harness that to kind of check myself out. Wow, this is exhilarating. Speed, any kind of speed, right? When you're flying down on your bike, you're flying on skates, on skis, on whatever it is, speed often can trigger flow. It does for me. Any kind of physical challenge, right? A lot of us we shift into flow when we're just challenged just enough so that it's not too frustrating. Deadlines, right? Some of us really, we really start to perform well with deadlines. All of a sudden it's like, I got to get right into it. Lee, yeah, conscious breathing, absolutely. Conscious breathing, deep breathing, some types of strong breathing techniques can shift you into flow as well, for sure. Writing, meditation, long periods of silence. So if you have any others, let me know. Let's throw them up there and share, because there are many, of course. So the last practice or training, so just to review, the first was to know flow, to start to recognize flow in your own life. Get curious about how your settings work. That's the second one, is really to recognize or to know your flow triggers, right? How do your settings work? How do your apps work? When do you go offline and get distracted, or when do you come fully online and become fully engaged? What triggers you? The third practice is to train your brain. This is where the mindfulness training comes in. These mental strength training techniques that can help you to repattern your brain to pay attention on purpose more often for longer periods of time. So when we actually schedule periods of uninterrupted time, when we shut down so that we can watch ourselves, we're able to train our brains to show up more fully. So let's do a little practice. Hopefully you're up for this. Close the door and shut down those phones if you want. It's just going to be for a moment or two. The question we're going to ask ourselves throughout this is simply, am I distracted or am I directed? So remembering that a distracted mind has no power and a directed mind has limitless potential, we're just noticing when our minds get distracted. And they will, by the way, because our minds are like these untrained puppy dogs running all over the place. And by noticing when that puppy dog has run away into a thought, into a story, we're just going to bring ourselves back. So, distracted or directed? Let's do this. Just place your feet to the floor. Close your eyes for a moment. Take a deep breath. And you're just going to place a light attention on the experience of breathing. What does it feel like to be breathing in this moment in your body? Just by bringing your attention to your breath, just like Lee said, conscious breathing, just by bringing your attention to your breath, it brings your attention into your body. And your body is always present. Your body can't be in the future. Your body can't be distracted. It's just here. So by noticing your breath, you're noticing your body, and by noticing your body, you're bringing your mind into the present, to this moment. It's very simple. So just riding the rhythm of your breath, like you're floating on the waves of the ocean up and down. And when you notice your mind start to wander, and it will, just say very gently to yourself, distracted. And as soon as you say that, distracted, it will bring you immediately back into the moment. So being present is the most natural thing we can be. Our minds, our thinking minds, while incredibly useful to create, to invent, to problem solve, in many ways it's just overused. So by noticing when you get distracted and just coming back to your breath, it's a way of training yourself to show up right here without having to think, because you don't really need to problem solve right now. Distracted or directed. So noticing this practice of mental strength training or mindfulness is really a practice of noticing. We get better at noticing when we're here and when we're not. And when we can notice more often, we get better. We start to notice when we are here. We start to notice and recognize flow. We start to notice and recognize those moments when we are fully engaged. And when we can start to recognize that more, like anything else, we can start to extend our experience. So it begins with a simple training your mind to just be here and here and here. And so now you can open your eyes and just notice if you feel any different. Maybe you feel a little bit clearer. The thing is, we are more present than we think we are. Oftentimes, I hear from people all the time, actually, I'm so crazy busy. I'm so crazy busy. I'm so crazy busy. When we just think that we're so crazy busy all the time, we will be crazy busy. When we can start to recognize those pauses, those notes between the notes, right? The breath between thoughts, the pause in conversation. When we can start to notice that more, we get better at noticing what's already right with us. We don't focus as much on what we think is wrong with us. So flow is happening already. Flow is happening already. Get to know it. Here are some fantastic resources, everybody. I highly recommend you jump off this call at the end and go to the Flow Genome Project. So Flow Genome Project co-founders are Stephen Kotler and Jamie Wheel. They're authors of Stealing Fire. Stephen wrote The Rise of Superman. And Flow, which is the original book on flow by Mihály Csíkszentmihályi. It's a very long, complicated name for a fantastic book. Are your resources, really. And on the Flow Genome Project, you can take a flow profile and get to know how you access flow better. So this is just the beginning. I'm here to just offer up a very basic introduction to what's happening already for you. And I encourage you to drop in, to check this out, to check it out for yourself, and to stay in touch with me. So I'm going to give you a couple of different ways you can do that. So know flow, know your flow triggers, and train to sustain flow. Those are the three things we talked about here. just going to pass through here and give you my contact information. So I have a book called On the Verge, Wake Up, Show Up, and Shine. And my book is, I don't call it flow, I call it natural state. But it really is about accessing our most powerful state of presence. I like to refer to it as clear mind, bright body, and open heart. In my book, I have practices and strategies that I offer as well on a free app. The app is called On the Verge, as you see, and the app has all of the practices and strategies that I talk about in the book. So definitely download that. And also a free podcast. I go weekly talking about all types of subjects having to do with flow and mindfulness and optimizing life and how to really just show up, feel fully alive, access our full potential more often, and just make the world a whole lot better. So I appreciate you all joining me today. Thank you very much. Please email me, Cara@carabradley.net. Stay in touch. I'll be doing more of these and would love to engage with you. If you have any questions, I also do some coaching if you're interested in support for your own practices. So thank you all so much. Please let me know if you have any questions, and check me out on Facebook and also Flow Genome Project on Facebook. There's so much going on in that realm as well. Take care, everybody. Have a fantastic day.